Hello and welcome to a special edition of Shattered Lives, the Irish Daily Star's crime podcast. I'm Paul Healy, chief reporter with the Irish Daily Star, and I'm joined today by Michael O'Toole, crime correspondent with the Irish Daily Star. And we are speaking about a case that everybody knows a little bit about something about, which is the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. 3-year-old Madeleine McCann disappeared on the 3rd of May 2007 from an apartment flat there in the Ocean Club in Praia da Luz. And since then, every theory under the sun has been floated in relation to her disappearance. But what's the reason why we're talking about it now? Well, it seems to be probably the most significant development in at least the last decade, hopefully, in this case, with a recent search there in the Portugal area, assisted or facilitated really by the German investigation into the suspect Christian Bruckner. And so we're going to discuss that development, but also the case itself, because Michael has quite a bit of history with this case in particular. He went over to Portugal. He was one of the many reporters from all over the world who were first at the scene. And so he has a unique insight into the atmosphere at the beginning of all of that. So, yeah, I suppose we'll start there, Mick. Can you recall being asked by the news desk, by the editor, to go over to Portugal for this?
Yes, I can, and I'll tell you why. So I went over it. I mean, this is interesting for me. I went over in September. Okay, so that was May, June, July, 4 months, probably a wee bit more, because it was probably middle September, and there was still a media frenzy about this. So just to give you an example, the reason why I went over, I went with photographer Jim Walpole, and we were over there. I think we were there for about a week. And the reason I was sent over is the Star asked me to write, it was a book to be given away with the paper. Now, it was about 30,000 words. So it was a sort of long form journalism, which we give away with the paper in the form of a book or a booklet. You know what I mean? It wasn't a big book, but it was 30,000 words, and it was still immediate stuff. So I spent, typical of the Star, they give you about 10 days to write the bloody thing. So it was murder trying to get it done, but we got there in the end. But it was one of the things they wanted me to go over to Praia da Luz and just to see the lie of the land. And I'm glad I did, because I got and we'll talk about this, I got a very, very strong emotion of anger when I was there. I'll talk about that in a while, but very, very angry, I have to say. My wee girl, my eldest, was born in 2005, in September 2005, so she was just a wee bit younger than Maddie when she disappeared. So I got really, really angry when I was over there. But we're there for a week, and now at that stage, the family I think the family, Kate and Jerry McCann, the parents, and the 2 other children, flew out of Praia da Luz, out of Faro, probably around the same time we were getting there, because I think it was September 2007 that they left. So it was roughly the same time. So you could feel their spirits around the place, but they weren't there themselves. You'll remember, listeners may remember, that one of the big focal points of the publicity campaign, of the whole media story, was there was an Anglican church couple of hundred yards away in Praia da Luz itself, and the McCanns would have gone there an awful lot. And I remember, it's a beautiful church, absolutely beautiful, white, just classically Mediterranean, shall we say, all white sandstone and that sort of stuff. And I remember going to it, and at this stage, and you'll know about this, Paul, at this stage, the population had turned. Okay, so you and I are at a murder scene or whatever, and I say if it's a biggie, you could be there for 2 days, you could be there for 3 days. The first day, people are normally fine. People are normally talkative. I think in day 2, and definitely when you get to day 3, they go against you. They don't want to know. They're probably had it up to here with journalists trying to talk to them. And so they become uncommunicative, I'll put it that way. That was very much the case in Praia da Luz there. People did not want to know. And there were I remember there was a whole rake of posters. I remember at the time watching it as a civilian, watching it, and there were posters everywhere in Praia da Luz for just that iconic picture of Madeleine. You can see her left eye, the one that has the wee glitch in it. So when I got there, most of the posters had been taken down. And I think the people of Praia da Luz definitely turned against the media, but I do think they turned against the McCann family as well.
The sad thing about all of this, I find, and I mean, I suppose, look, I am a journalist, and so I'm looking at it from that angle, but I'm also looking at it in the same way I suppose every member of the public who has had any interest in this has over the years. And I find that the saddest thing about all of this is that the finger was pointed at the parents without any real evidence, and it grew legs over the years. And I think their names were blacklisted by a huge chunk of people all across the world because a certain narrative was put out. And we can speak about this. Like, there's two different things at play here, I suppose. And both Kate and Jerry have said this in numerous interviews since, that they would regret the way that they would have left her in the apartment, and they would have been checking in on her routinely, and they did defend that, but
it's indefensible.
Parents. I understand parents' anger for that.
It's indefensible, Paul.
Yes.
And this is why I'm going to tell you about why I'm angry. Why I got so angry, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So we went to Praia da Luz, and we're at the Ocean Sick Club, and there's a sort of, we were outside, covered, but you couldn't get in by fence, and there was people may have seen it, there was a tennis court where Maddie was playing. Then over in the right, and I still remember this, over in the right was the infamous tapas bar where the McCanns and the others had been. And we knew that apartment 5A, so I'm looking at it. So the tapas bar is on the right, way over, maybe 100 feet over. And we're looking at you can see the top of the apartment where Maddie was. Now, the tapas bar was way down low. Their apartment was way up. I'm talking there's probably a height difference of maybe 50 feet, but it's over 100 feet away. You could see, from my perspective, you could see the top of the patio window in the ground floor from where they were. And my overriding anger, and I say this in the book, my overriding emotion when I was there, I felt this anger boiling up in me that they would decide to leave 3 children in that place and go and check on them. They checked on them regularly. And I remember it was a subject of massive conversation. People going, would you leave your kids like that? And it was like, you were sort of checking to see if others would. Anyway, so for me, that wasn't, I know they've spoken of their regret. I got really angry looking at that because I was going, hold on a minute here.
Yeah, and as you say, that obviously with any parent eviscerates strong emotions, but I think it's another, and I know you're not saying this, but it's another thing entirely to then point the finger at them and say that they are responsible for the disappearance of their daughter. They have to and have had to live with their decision for the last 16 years, and I can't imagine the pain. It must be unbearable, unbelievable. And they did many interviews, but they haven't done interviews now in years, because every time they did an interview, their body language was examined by every armchair detective under the sun. But certainly I've seen interviews with experts in relation to this, people who've actually covered the case and investigated the case. There is no evidence, and there never has been any evidence to suggest that Kate and Jerry McCann had anything to do with their daughter's disappearance. And to be accused of that, I can't imagine it. But also to have their every movement and their body language examined, just because maybe they're not crying their eyes out in an interview. You know, Mick, when you interview someone, the amount of preparation that they go through in their head, and they're thinking about what they're going to say. Just because they don't cry on camera or on cue doesn't mean that it isn't an incredibly emotional thing for them. I mean,
you see, right, I'm going to take issue with one thing you've said, right?
That's fine. We can argue.
Oh, we will. No, I often found this, and I often found it in the troubles here, right? If British journalists, because we're crime reporters, we can talk about this. If British journalists were scrutinising the Gardaí, the British journalists would always have a slightly haughty, and they did on occasions call the Gardaí the Keystone Cops. They were called the Keystone Cops, right? Now, I find there is the same sense with the view of the Portuguese police. See, you say there was no evidence. The Portuguese police went to a judge, put evidence to them, and that judge decided on that evidence to declare them arguidos, which is not it means persons of interest, shall we say. They're not formally charged. It's a different thing. And I always find this interesting when people say, look, if Gardaí nominated someone as a suspect, because you and I know how the Gardaí work, I think you would say, all right, I can see what they've done. They've done this. But I'm not saying about this, McCann's themselves, the case against them, they're no longer Arguidos, right? They're no longer persons of interest. However, I do find it slightly irritating when people say that the Portuguese cops made them Arguidos without any evidence. It's as if they don't have the same normal rules of evidence that the Gardaí or the English police would have. And I do sense that there is a sense, I always got that sense that it's particularly British journalists look down on the Portuguese police.
Perhaps that's true, but I think the consensus is since, and this is with experts, this is from watching documentaries and interviews with persons who've investigated the case, that they feel that the police focus in the beginning was all about the parents, and it was not about the possibility that she could have been kidnapped or that that something else could have befallen her. They only had the parents in mind. And in those crucial 24 hours, 48 hours and the weeks that followed, where they could have investigated the alternative, they didn't, because they were already looking at the parents as being responsible. And so they can never get those hours and weeks back wherein the real suspect or the real story wasn't investigated in the crucial hours where they could have actually found evidence.
See, I don't know about that, Paul, because at the time, right, and it broke, of all places, on TVAM or Good Morning Britain, because I think a relative of Jerry McCann rang saying, look, this girl's missing, you've got to help us. And that was the start of it. And by the way, it captivated Britain and Ireland. I mean, every day it captivated, every single day. So I looked at it from a crime reporter's eyes as well. Okay. So I can tell you from my reading of it at the time, I never got the sense in the first couple of weeks that they were focusing on the family. I have to say that. In fact, I got the exact opposite.
Really?
No, I watched it live, and when you can see something, and you and I could see, as crime reporters, you and I would look at something and go, yeah, that's that, or that's why they're saying that. At no stage did I get that. They were the centre of the investigation, in the sense that they were the centre of efforts to try and find their daughter. I don't think that at that stage the police were looking at them. I think they obviously looked at them later on. As we said, in August 2007, there was a major event, and it was British sniffer dogs from Leicestershire were brought over. The reason why, you know why Leicestershire police were involved?
No.
Because they live in Leicester.
Oh, okay, right.
They live in Leicestershire, and so they were sent over. They were sent over within a day. There was a team sent over within a day. But anyway, so in August, things started to turn. But I remember in August, there was the whole thing about the cadaver dogs. Right? And I had loads of rows about cadaver dogs. But there were cadaver dogs brought in, and the reports said that they found the scent of blood in the apartment, and also in a car that had been used by the McCanns after Maddie went missing. So I do think obviously attention shifted, but I can tell you, my memory is there was nothing negative about the McCanns in the first month. So I don't know where that's coming from.
But didn't it emerge that the blood, they could never tell whether it was from a human? They never were able to exactly determine that it was such a small trace of whatever it was. And then the car, they rented the car something like 30 days after the disappearance of Madeleine, in the absolute height of the biggest media storm there's ever been for a missing child. And we're supposed to believe that they possibly somehow bundled her into a car amidst all of the media cameras. It just seems farcical.
No, it's not farcical. It's evidence, Paul, right? And the evidence was sent, and it was the Leicestershire, which just by coincidence happens to be a world expert area for DNA. And the DNA, I always remember, it was LCN, low copy cell count or low copy count number. So it's very, very microscopically small. And I can remember at the time, because I won't say who it was, but there was a journalist broke a story, said, and it was wrong, saying the DNA was a match to Madeleine. And I went, holy shit, right? And he said it live on air, and it was completely wrong. However, it was only when it went to Leicestershire, to the DNA experts there, and they said, we cannot say whose it is.
Yes.
So you know what I'm saying? So this case is fascinating for the case itself, but also the outside factors. Now, you and I have often spoken about a young Irish girl called Amy Fitzpatrick, and I won't go into too much detail about this, but it's fair to say that Amy Fitzpatrick has not got 5% of the coverage that Madeleine McCann has.
No, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think because of her age, maybe she's older. She's not a young blue-eyed child. I suppose maybe certain assumptions are made about the case of Amy as well.
Oh, I think there's a class issue here. I absolutely think there's a class issue here, and I'm sorry to say, it's class. You know, it's the middle class. Like, for example, if that had been a working class family who left their children in the apartment and went 150 feet away, I would contend they would get a much rougher time. I know they spoke of their regret, and I know that, you know what I'm saying. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the way there was focus on them. I thought if that had been Detzer from Donamead, right, or whatever, or a fella from Moss Side in Manchester, right, or from whatever, Tower Hamlets, whatever you want to say, I think our colleagues in the media would have been much harsher on them. Is that not a fair suggestion?
I think, yeah, that's fair. I also look at it on the other side of things, and I'm like, well, okay, people say, oh, wouldn't it be great if other cases got the same level of attention? Well, yes, it would, but this case does deserve this level of attention. She is a 3-year-old girl who's missing. She does deserve to be found, and thank God there's an effort to find her. People might say I'm being naive here, and they haven't found her in 16 years, they're not going to find her now. I am hopeful that this investigation is leading to something. But
well, answer me this, right? Are you? Maybe I'm cynical and everything, right?
Oh, you're definitely cynical.
Are you? It better than being naive. Are you putting all your eggs in Christian Buchner?
No, look, I'm not a detective, but I think.
Yeah. Hold on a minute, right? We're going to get annoyed now. Yet you dismissed the Portuguese police, and now you're saying you're not a detective.
Because I think that investigation has been widely dismissed by persons who are far more educated on the topic than I, and that investigation went nowhere. And Gonzalo Amaral was kind of widely looked down upon for his investigation and his viewpoints. I mean, he has stuck to his view that it was the parents, yet I don't see any definitive piece of evidence that the parents had anything to do with the disappearance of their child. And to scapegoat them in the way that he has and others have, I think, is a disgrace. That's all I'll say. In the absence of evidence,
However, okay, so you're dismissing all the experience and expertise that man, he was the top investigator for the Portuguese police. And I think your attitude chimes with an awful lot of the British media coverage of the Portuguese police. Now, you and I I've looked at this more than you, but you and I have not delved deep enough into this to see what the Portuguese police had. They wanted 40, remember the 40 questions?
Yes, I do remember the 40 questions, yes,
okay.
And that she did.
Okay, so anyway, yeah. And that's her right, and that's fine. I probably would have done the same. But here's a question for you, right? The reason I was asking about Christian Bruckner, because there is a piece of evidence, and it's quite significant, and it's Irish. There is a man, the Smith family from Drogheda, the famous Smith family from Drogheda, okay? So they were in Praia de Luz at the time, and they were coming home from an Irish pub. I was at that Irish pub, it's the only Irish pub in the place, very nice. And they were, around the time of Maddie's disappearance, they were walking towards the Ocean Park.
Ocean Club, yeah.
Ocean Club. And they were spread out. I actually walked on the road. They were spread out like you would on holiday, maybe 4 or 5 of them abreast, right? And they saw a man walking towards them, carrying a child, and they, basically the same clothes. I think it was the pink pajamas, right? And the child had her head on the man's shoulder. So they could only see the back of her head. He was carrying her that way, right? Now, that man he says he may now be mistaken, but they basically raised the prospect of that being
Jerry McCann.
Jerry McCann. Now, obviously, they've denied that, and the family now say they might not. But one thing is significant. Colleagues of ours in the Sunday World asked the Smith family, Mr. Smith, about Christian Bruckner, and he said, "No, that's not the man I saw." So that is evidence.
It is. It's evidence, and it's interesting. But as you just said there yourself, they now accept that maybe they might have been mistaken. I mean, people see things all the time. It doesn't necessarily. I'm not saying it should be dismissed, but there were other sightings and other drawings of alleged suspects that are different from others. It's hard to put any weight on any of them without further evidence.
Yes, but several people in that party give statements, so it wasn't just one person. Say, for example, there was Jane Tanner, one of the top of seven, saw a man and that who carrying a child, and that was later discounted. But that was one person. This is several people giving this statement, and it did match. The clothing matched, and it was the child roughly the same size. I think the same physical size of Maddie. So the Portuguese police did put a lot of weight in that. Now, he couldn't say definitively who it was one way or the other, but from my reading, I was just doing research for it. He's happy enough because he said it was between 5'7" and 5'9", and Christian Bruckner is definitely much taller than that. So, he was happy to say, I don't need to add anything to my original statement. In other words, I didn't see Christian. That's not the man that I saw. So, look, who knows? We can talk about Christian Bruckner a while, but I've always thought about that Smith family sighting has been very significant. And I think that the English police and the Portuguese police regard it as significant. Don't know who it is, but I'm just saying he appears to think that it wasn't Bruckner.
It's interesting, and it's just to go back to what you're saying, I'm not putting all my eggs in the Bruckner basket and saying I'm hopeful that the police in Germany are onto something, and they have, and we'll talk about Bruckner in a minute. They supposedly have evidence that none of us are aware of. That's the hard part about all of this, is that they have. That's how police works. You know this yourself. They have evidence that we don't know about. So, in the absence of information, people are speculating.
But Paul, there's my point. We don't know all the evidence that the Portuguese police had. And that's what I'm saying about, people's views in the Portuguese police. You and I get, if we're lucky, 5% of information about what's happened. Now, the files have been released, but we don't know what the context was and what they were looking at.
But the cadaver dog thing went nowhere. The blood thing went nowhere.
No. I don't think it. No. You can't be saying it didn't go nowhere.
It did go nowhere. It didn't result in. We're getting into a row now.
No. The police did their bit, right? And then the dogs give an indication, and then it went to experts. So it didn't. It's not that it went nowhere. It was inconclusive because they couldn't say.
Yeah. So look, it's obviously a highly contested case. People have their opinions. You have yours. It's weighted. It's weighted in the evidence that was gathered. Unfortunately, it hasn't led to any conviction or anybody being arrested in relation to it. The most significant development in this case was in 2020 when Christian Bruckner was announced as being the suspect by the German police. He's a convicted sex offender, and he's in prison for raping a 72-year-old woman in the Praia de Luz area of Portugal. So he was living in the area at the time in 2007. And he is a convicted paedophile as well, a string of sexual offences to his name, including this rape of a woman in her 70s. So he has been named as a suspect for a series of reasons. We don't know, as I said to you already, we don't know all of the evidence that the German prosecutor has, the German police have. They named him as Christian B, and his face then emerged not long after that, but his full name is Christian Bruckner. He's still referred in some media as Christian B, because they've never actually officially named him as Christian Bruckner. But he was residing in Praia de Luz 2007, and he is supposed to have confessed to a friend of his in a bar that he knew all about what happened to Madeleine McCann. His camper van was in the area, was spotted in the area. He was known to be residing in it. And then probably the most crucial piece of information that we do know that the German police have is in relation to his phone, a phone number connected to him, I should say, that was pinging in an area not far from the Ocean Club at the time of her disappearance. And given his history, given the alleged confession, given given all of that, he is the prime suspect in the case. He has vehemently denied any involvement and has spoken out from prison saying that he had nothing to do with this whatsoever. Look,
he would say that, wouldn't
he? I think what is interesting about this search is that the Germans are starting to hopefully put their money where their mouth is, in that they are showing that this is still an active investigation and that it's much more than just naming this guy. What I find fascinating about this is that the Germans they're very methodical and very careful about what they release into the public domain. For them to put his name out there is actually a rather extraordinary step and something they don't often do. The fact that they put it out there, it's almost exuding a certain level of confidence. And the German prosecutor, Hans Christian Walters, has said they believe this is their man, this is the suspect. So what information do they have that we don't know about? Well, we might have got some hint in relation to that with the search of this reservoir. I'm going to badly pronounce it now, but it's the Barragem do Arede reservoir, which is about 30 miles outside of Praia de Luz, the Ocean Club. And this was said to be Christian Bruckner's little paradise. He'd called it his little paradise. And the police supposedly have pictures and video of him at this particular reservoir over the years, including at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. And he was said to have been seen there days after her disappearance. So what I find really interesting about this search is that they were only there for 3 days. And it seems to be a targeted search. So supposedly way back when the Portuguese police actually did search this particular reservoir, and they did a search of the whole lake area, the whole thing, whereas this was a much more targeted, smaller search of a wooded kind of area just off the banks of this of the water there. And they cleared off all these trees. They used heavy machinery to clear off this whole area. And reporters have been in it since. I've seen video footage of reporters going down to the search site, and you can see all of these little holes, these deep holes that they dug, but very small. Like it's not like they dug up the whole area. They have particularly targeted areas where they dug all these little holes. So it's like as if they had very, very specific information about something and the exact location of said something. And what I see printed in the British media is, this could be speculation, but it is based off sources. These aren't my sources, but supposedly they were looking for rags, which could be the pink Marks and Spencer pajamas that Madeleine McCann was wearing on the night of her disappearance. If they do discover that, they have to bring it back and check it and do DNA, etc. So supposedly they have this. The police have indicated that they did recover items of interest to the investigation. So whatever this targeted search has uncovered, they seem to have found it or found something, and it'll be a period of time now before we find out whether those tests yield anything. But it's very interesting.
What I found really interesting about the whole process was the German police have said Maddie is dead.
Yes, there's a degree of confidence there in that.
There is. And what you were saying about the German police being very careful. And I don't think it's enough for Bruckner to have told some lad in the bar, because, and just to explain, the circumstances were a story, he was in the bar with a fella, a story about Madeleine came on TV, and he indicated very strongly that he knew all about that. And then, do you know what he did next? He showed him a video of himself raping and beating that 72-year-old lady. He showed it to his buddy. So he effectively said, I know what happened there. And then he showed it. Well, what an animal. But would you not agree, that's not enough for the German police to conclude that she's dead?
No.
So in other words, what I'm saying is they have to have more.
No, they have to have more, and whatever it is, they're keeping it back. That's normal police work. You hope that it's something more significant than what we've been talking about. I'll mention Mark Williams-Thomas because I watched his documentary not long ago. He is a former police officer himself, an investigator, and he's effectively ruled out Christian Bruckner and said that based off his own investigation, he thinks that Christian Bruckner is a false lead. He interviewed Hans Christian Walters, the German prosecutor, in that documentary, and he went all over Praia de Luz and Germany as well, into the areas where Bruckner lived, spoke to people that knew him. And the key thing about this mobile phone, he found that the area that it was pinging off, it didn't exactly suggest that he was right outside the Ocean Club in Praia de Luz, that he could have been miles outside of it. And then even that number, it's been connected to Christian Bruckner. Apparently others had access to it, and he also used multiple other phone numbers. So cast doubt over whether he was even using that particular phone on that particular day. So there's a lot of doubt. And then the biggest thing of all is that Christian Bruckner claims he has an alibi, this woman who says that she was with him on the night that Madeleine disappeared. And he actually tracked that woman down, and she said that she was indeed with him. She's not connected to him in any way anymore. She's got her own partner, and she was too terrified to even appear on camera. But I think through her own partner, she confirmed that she was, and she's got apparently no reason to confirm this. She's in no particular relationship with Christian Bruckner now, but she says she was with Christian Bruckner at the time. So if all of that is true, then that rules him out.
See, and Mark Williams-Thomas is an excellent investigator. He broke the whole Jimmy Savile story. If you remember, there was a whole internal kerfuffle in the BBC, and then the people brought it to ITV, and Williams-Thomas did it. But before that, you're right. I think he was a Met Police, but he effectively investigated child sex abuse. You know what I mean? He was a real top-notch investigator, and I've always had an awful lot of respect for him. So he would be of the belief that Bruckner wasn't involved at all.
Yeah, based off, let's not downplay his credentials here. He obviously has them, and he did a bit of detective work, and he wasn't able to match up based off the information that's publicly available, that to definitively prove that Bruckner did it. So he has actually gone out and said that he doesn't believe that the police have the right man. He also has contact with Bruckner. He's been speaking to him from prison, and so he seems to be maintaining that this alibi may hold up. But he did also say there is information that the Germans have that he doesn't have, that no one has, and perhaps that's the most crucial evidence of all.
Let me ask you: did he give an indication of what he thinks happened, or who was involved?
Yeah, I've heard him say,
without naming anybody. I mean, I would just be interested.
I've heard him say that speculate that she may have that Madeleine may have escaped the apartment herself and gone out onto the road, and then that an opportunist would have taken her in the moment, rather than from the apartment itself. That's his speculation based upon his investigation of it, that may be what has happened. That's pretty extraordinary to imagine, that somebody would just chance upon the child in the street and take her. But that's his theory.
I was standing outside the apartment, and if you turn right, with your back to the apartment, you turn right, you go down a slope, not a hill, a slope for about 30 meters. And do you remember this famous shop?
Yes.
There was a shop, effectively part of the complex, and I think there'd been whole speculation and rumor that Maddie may have what Mark is saying, escaped from the house and walked towards the shop, But the one thing that struck me about that, it was in the height of the tourist season, and it was a busy enough road. Now, I don't think there was obviously there was no CCTV, but I look, and I'm going to defer to him. I've always had problems with that I find it impossible to believe that nobody would have seen her. So in other words, what I'm saying is, it's not as if she came out of the house and within 2 seconds was gone. There were so many people who would have, and it was a shop, and it was a busy shop, and that's the start of the busy season. So I've always been dubious. And I'm going to, while we're talking, I know Gonzalo Amaral has his views about the parents. Yeah. Okay. He and there was a libel case, and the family won, but then the Court of Appeal in Portugal said he was entitled to his views under freedom of expression. But one thing I've always how can I put this? How if a family was involved in that, how could you possibly keep the pretense going so long? And how could you be so active and so determined to find your daughter? Surely you would just want it all to go away. But that doesn't militate, or I'm not contradicting myself. Look, Portuguese police looked at evidence, and that evidence led them in a certain way, and then they went to a judge. And the family are no longer Arguidos. But just that whole idea, how could one family possibly do that? It stretches credulity for me.
Yeah, I think so. And I think they would have to be absolute criminal masterminds at this point to have carried out that crime, covered it up successfully all these years. I don't find it credible that they had anything to do, based off what's out there in the public domain for the last 16 years, that they had anything to do with the disappearance of their daughter. I'm not downplaying I just want to clarify the fact that maybe they might have been looked at, because of course they had to be looked at, but I think in the absence of any evidence, I think you can't say at this stage that they had anything to do with the disappearance of their daughter, unless you're going to present some sort of... And I think they would have to be criminal masterminds. It's just extraordinary to believe that they would be able to keep that facade going now for 16 years.
100%. And just like you and I would know this, criminality works when it has as few moving parts as possible. So it's as simple as possible, right? And it hurts my brain to even think about that, because how could that possibly be that they would go, right, we're going to do this, and this is how we're going to cover it up, and we're going to mount up a campaign, and we're going to talk to any journalist who wants to talk to us, and we're going to keep talking about it, because surely the thing would be to can we just forget it, can we just leave it be, or forget about it? So that's a very big thing for me. But look, I mean, I don't think we're too far apart. The Portuguese police followed what evidence they had, okay? There was terrible... I thought the Portuguese were treated very shabbily by the British press, I have to say. But it's just sort of colonialism, and that I think Irish police have experienced at the hands of British media. So that's all I'll say about that. But just that whole thing about that conspiracy theory just does not hold water for me.
No, me neither. Do you think maybe the media pressure didn't help? I mean, I'd say the Portuguese police obviously they'd never seen anything like it in terms of the absolute world media frenzy that descended on Praia de Luz, and the pressure that they would have felt to get it done.
Yeah, but also, and I got there was the first time I was in Portugal, and Portugal, up until Portugal was a dictatorship up until I think 1976, around that time, right? And I always got the sense, so it was 2007 when I was there, and I got the sense you could still feel that vestiges of dictatorship. It was a very closed society, and the Portuguese police were very closed, and they didn't really communicate with the media. So, it wasn't like if it happened here, you'd have Garda liaison officers, you'd have Gardaí giving statements every hour. You know what I'm saying? And even in Britain. And I just think it was too big a job for them in that sense about they were doing their investigation, grand, no problem. But the outside pressures, because they were even under pressure to make statements, and they never make statements. And I was like, what? You want us to talk to the media? They just, they just didn't happen. So it was a whole new world for them. They've obviously investigated serious crime and kidnappings and murders, and obviously, and they're an expert police force in what they do. But this was another level. And I wonder how many police forces would have been prepared for that, and especially as Portugal still had the vestiges of secrecy about it.
Yeah. I just want to talk about as well, just on Christian Bruckner, his whole MO supposedly was that he broke into apartments, and then couple that with the fact that he's a paedophile and seemed to have interest in children. That's, also another reason that he's been looked at, because, I mean, obviously the belief is that someone broke into that apartment and took the child either as an opportunistic thing or for whatever reason, whether he actually deliberately targeted Madeleine. We don't know, but that was part of his MO. And then another extraordinary thing that came out of Christian Bruckner is this Irish lady, Hazel Behan, who, when he was named as the chief suspect, his face was all over the media, and Hazel Behan recognised him as her alleged attacker. She was raped in the Algarve in Portugal in June 2004. when she was 20 years old, and she recognised Christian Bruckner as being the man responsible, and that resulted in Bruckner coming under investigation for that as well. So that was an extraordinary development in its own right.
Absolutely. I will say one thing, you're quite right, and his MO was to break in, but his MO was to break in and attack people on the scene. He didn't take anybody away. Now, maybe the size of Madeleine meant it was easier to carry away, but his MO was to, I mean, I think Hazel Behan was attacked in a holiday flat. That lady who suffered the rape and beating was attacked in a holiday flat. So yes, but just that one, if his MO is to attack people in a flat, why not attack the child in the flat? Why take the child?
We don't know why that is, yeah. But I mean, just given, he was caught with thousands of child abuse images that were found buried under his dead dog, I mean, God knows the offences this sicko has been responsible for that he hasn't been caught for, even if he's not responsible for the death of Madeleine McCann, he's clearly a monster. So God knows what else he may be responsible for. I was going to mention I have a rake of his history here. He was imprisoned for the sexual abuse of a child. It's worth mentioning that as well. So I mean, he has also sexually abused a child and was convicted in relation to that as well. So I suppose, what is the conclusion from all this? I mean, we don't have the answers.
My conclusion is, I hope the German police are right. I hope that they're saying this with conviction because they have evidence that we don't know about. I didn't realise that Mark Williams-Thomas is a fantastic journalist and a fantastic investigator. And it's typical of the man to go and find the woman. But that's really significant. So that's slightly depressing that he's right. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying there? I would, it's slightly depressing because I would hope that he's Bruckner's obviously a very dangerous man, and there are loads of things that would indicate that he should be a person of interest, but we don't know about the phones and stuff. But I hope that the German police have more rock solid information, and I would anticipate that they probably do, because they have said they believe she's dead.
Yeah, the level of confidence to say that they believe that she has been murdered says to me that they must have some sort of direct evidence in relation to that. And then this search also, I think, gives renewed hope. And they say they've recovered materials of interest, and the fact that it's so targeted makes me think that they found what they were looking for. Obviously, it wasn't the body of Madeleine McCann, because we'd know by now, but they must have gotten what they were looking for. Now they have to do tests on it to determine if it's definitely what they were looking for. So we'll have to wait and see. But it's a case that continues to fascinate and diverges opinion, even between me and you. But
I just think that the Portuguese police did what they did, and they took sound decisions for what they did. The only arguido now in the scene is Christian Bruckner. Let's be clear about that. There was another man who was made an arguido who suffered a horrendous time from the press. Really, I mean, he was hung, drawn, and quartered effectively and convicted.
Again, with no evidence.
See, because I think British people don't understand what an arguido is. It's just a person of interest, not a suspect. Do you know what I mean?
Don't you loop me in with the Brits?
No, I'm only saying that people have to step back and go, right, I haven't said he did it. Mm. He's in Francis mise en examen. You are a person of interest, right? So, I think about Maddie a lot, I have to say, and I would hope that there is a conclusion, and I hope that and here's another point, right? This will be my last point. Something tells me that the German police have something, because why would they, I'm not going to say bother, why would they go to this lengths that they didn't? They don't have skin in the game, right? It's a different country. Mm. So that tells me, but just what Mark Williams-Thomas there, was saying about that alibi, but he's a fantastic journalist, but surely the Germans have something.
Let's hope so. Well, thanks, Mick. I think we'll leave it there. All right, thank you.
All right.